The crowd roared as Marcus stepped forward, his eyes scanning the line of alien gladiators. Everyone expected him to choose the fiercest, the most striking. But he walked right past them, straight to the one they called the ugly one. Why? Because he knew something they didn't. This isn't a story about pity. It's about seeing what others refuse to. The hollow screens flickered with slow-motion replays of perfect dismemberments and photogenic blood spray. Marcus didn't glance at them. The arena announcer kept shouting about aggression coefficients and aesthetic scores like they mattered. The betting lines projected beside each gladiator glowed with their threat assessments, all calculated by algorithms that weighed symmetry over survival instinct. Nobody looked twice at Nara. She stood at the end of the line, her elongated frame, more suited to crawling through maintenance shafts than combat. Scars webbed across her gray-green hide, some still weeping neon blue fluid where the med packs hadn't sealed them right. One eye was permanently milky from an old injury, and her carapace had dents where the nutrient graphs hadn't taken. The crowd noise dimmed when Marcus passed the front ranks of glittering champions to stop in front of her. Human brains evolved to spot symmetrical faces first. There are studies about this. Something to do with identifying threats faster when you're just another hairless ape on the savannah. The arena promoters knew it too. That's why they put all the pretty champions under the brightest lights, the ones with bioluminescent markings and those elegant, knife-edged limbs that looked good in promo hollows. Nara? She just stood there, one talon tapping absently against her thigh. She smelled faintly of antiseptic and singed wiring. Marcus raised his hand toward the selection panel. The audience held their breath. He could still pivot, grab the reigning champion with the gemstone implants or the brutalist war construct from the Forge Moons. His fingertips hovered over the hollow interface. Then he tapped Nara's profile without breaking eye contact. Her nostrils flared. The Archon's voice boomed through the stadium. Prize confirmed. Human designee selects. There was a pause while the system scanned her ID tag. The announcer had to consult his datapad before finishing. Designation Zarath Narath 2794. The crowd erupted in confused jeers. Even the other gladiators twisted to look. Most of them probably hadn't realized she was there until now. Marcus ignored the noise. He unhooked the victor's torque from around his neck and held it out to her instead of waiting for an attendant. The archaic rules said champions could claim anything in the arena as their reward. Weapons, ships, prisoners of war. No one ever picked broken things before. Nara took the torque, not with the reverence of a trophy but the cautious grip of someone checking for traps. Her inner eyelids blinked sideways before she spoke for the first time. You always this. Bad at winning? The guards moved in to escort them out. Marcus waited until they were halfway up the exit ramp before answering. He kept his voice low. Saw you block that ion hammer 2 days ago. Stance was all wrong for arena work. Textbook Serati military counter. A muscle jumped in Nara's jaw. She didn't deny it. Behind them, the next match was already starting. All colored smoke and dramatic music. The crowd had forgotten them already. That's the thing about spectacles, people only watch what's shiny, not what's real. Nara limped slightly as they walked, favoring her left side where the subdermal plating had cracked. Marcus didn't offer to help. He just matched her pace. The docking bay air smelled like plasma residue and cheap lubricant. Nara paused beside, a flickering status display showing fuel prices and departure schedules. She traced a claw down the screen thoughtfully, leaving minute scratches in the polymer. You could have had anything, she said at last. Why drag me into it? Marcus shrugged. He was looking past her, at the security cams mounted in the ceiling corners. Every single one had its lens ever so slightly angled away from this sector. Some trophies, he said, are worth more when nobody else knows their value. Nara exhaled through her nasal slits. It made a sound like a grinding gear. You're either very smart, she murmured, or about to be very dead. Walu. Guards hustled them toward the prisoner transfer shuttle. Its hull was pocked with micrometeorite scars and what looked like old burn marks from pulse fire. Someone had stenciled a crude joke about insurance claims by the boarding ramp. Inside, the seats were patched with tape that barely held the foam padding in. Marcus let Nara take the window spot, not out of courtesy, but because it gave him a clear line of sight to the cockpit door. She stretched her legs into the aisle, knee joints clicking. The pilot didn't bother with a safety briefing, just sealed the hatch and started the engines with a rattling whine. As the shuttle lifted off, Marcus leaned closer to be heard over the noise. "That scar on your forearm," he said. "Only one kind of weapon makes cauterized channels like that." Nara flexed her hand. The light caught the twisted tissue running from elbow to wrist. "So you like scars now?" "Just the ones that tell stories." The shuttle banked hard, throwing them against each other. Nara's elbow dug into his ribs, but there was no real force behind it. Controlled contact, testing his balance. Marcus let himself sway with the movement. Outside the grimy viewport, the arena's glittering spires receded. Somewhere below, bookies were already recalculating odds and wiping their boards clean. New champions would rise by sundown. The transfer shuttles, vibration settled into a constant hum just shy of painful, the kind that makes your back teeth ache after an hour. Nara stretched her legs across the aisle, knees popping like overheated hydraulics. "So," she said, picking at a loose thread on the seat's frayed restraints, "you blew your champion's pick on the arena's resident scrap heap. That's either tragic self-sabotage or the worst flirting attempt I've seen in 3 systems." Marcus watched a coolant leak drip from the ceiling vent onto his boot. It sizzled slightly. "Flirting's what you do when you've got options." Her nostrils flared, not quite a laugh. A diagnostics panel sputtered to life above their heads, flashing warnings in a script Marcus didn't recognize. Nara read it effortlessly. "Life support's fine," she translated. "They just cheaped out on the stabilizers." The shuttle hit turbulence. Her claws dug into the armrests, retracting just as fast when she caught him looking. "Not afraid of flying," she muttered. "Didn't ask." She tilted her head, studying him like a malfunction she couldn't quite diagnose. "You know the Sarati dirge for the 8th Legion." Marcus had hummed it earlier when the engines first powered up, an absent gesture, the way someone might tap a rhythm they've heard too many times. He shrugged. "Heard it somewhere." That somewhere would have been a battlefield. Nara's ears twitched backward. Nobody sings those hymns unless they've marched under them. The shuttle banked left, throwing shadows across her face. Light caught the jagged edges of her teeth. And humans don't march in Sarati formations. A proximity alert blared. The pilot cursed over the intercom in 3 different languages before switching it off. Marcus waited for the noise to die down. "Maybe I've got eclectic tastes." Nara exhaled through her secondary vocal slits, making a sound like a knife being sharpened. Eclectic. The word sat between them, sharp-edged. Trust builds fastest in sideways glances, not grand gestures, but the tiny admissions that say, "I know what you are." That's the thing about high-stakes games. Everyone's holding their cards too close, so you have to read the tells in how they breathe instead. Marcus nudged her boot with his. "You've got arena-grade suppressants in your system. Enough to fog a normal fighter's memory like yesterday's dreams. But you still tense up when someone walks behind you." Nara went very still. "And your left hand," he continued, "keeps curling like you're compensating for a weapon's weight that isn't there." The shuttle lights dimmed suddenly. Bad wiring or intentional ambiance, hard to tell. Nara's pupils dilated, black swallowing amber. "You're observant for a human. Not just humans hate arenas." A beat. Then she snorted, the tension snapping like an overstretched cable. "Fair." Outside the viewport, the purple smear of a nebula bled across the stars. Nara's reflection superimposed over it, warped by the cheap plexiglass. She reached up absently to touch the milky film covering her damaged eye. "Wasn't always like this," she said, almost conversational. Marcus watched the stars with her. "Know any other battle hymns?" She hummed 2 bars, something faster, meant for marches rather than funerals. Marcus picked up the next measure, rough where her notes were precise. The shuttle shuddered again. This time, Nara didn't grab the armrests. The nav console beeped. 15 minutes to docking. Nara stretched, working out the kinks in her spine. So, do I get to know why you really picked me? Marcus considered the question. Considered the way she'd automatically taken the seat with the best sightlines to both exits, how her eyes tracked every flicker on the diagnostics panel, the faint scars around her wrists where heavy shackles had dug in long enough to leave permanent marks. Figured we'd both hate the same people, he said at last. Nara showed her teeth. Not a smile. Not quite. But close. The docking klaxon sounded. Hydraulics whined as the shuttle began its descent. Nara leaned closer to be heard over the noise. 2 things, she said, holding up a claw. 1. If this is some convoluted assassination plot, I'll disembowel you with your own femur. Marcus nodded. Expected. 2. She hesitated just for a fraction of a second. The hymn you were humming earlier? 8th Legion didn't just die. They were erased. Every record, every monument, scoured clean. Nobody sings those songs unless they were there. The landing gear deployed with a bone-shaking thud. Marcus unbuckled his restraints. Like I said, eclectic tastes. Nara's ears twitched again, but this time she let it pass. The hatch hissed open, revealing a dimly lit hangar bay. The air smelled like ozone and stale filters. Nara stepped out first, rolling her shoulders like she was testing the gravity. When she glanced back at Marcus, there was something new in her gaze. Not trust, not yet, but the absence of a knife at his throat. Coming, human? Marcus followed. Behind them, the shuttle's engines cycled down with a weary groan. The bay, doors closed, sealing away the last traces of the arena's neon glow. Only the emergency strips lit their path forward. Red, like old blood, like warnings. They walked side by side, footsteps echoing. Neither mentioned the way Nara's hand kept drifting toward her hip, where a sidearm would have hung. Neither commented on how Marcus angled himself to keep the exits in view. 2 damaged things, pretending they didn't recognize the damage, in each other. Overhead, the comms crackled. A bored voice recited docking protocols. Somewhere deeper in the station, machinery rumbled. Nara's claws tapped an idle rhythm against her thigh. The same one Marcus had hummed earlier, but faster now. A war song, not a dirge. He matched her pace without a word. The ship's AI greeted them with the charm of a malfunctioning airlock. Oh good, said the voice from the ceiling speakers, all synthetic cheer wrapped around a core of sarcasm. I was hoping she'd have a name. The air recyclers kicked on with a wheeze, pushing stale air past Nara like it was sniffing her. Marcus flicked a switch on the wall panel. She's not cargo. His voice carried the same tone he'd use correcting someone who'd mislabeled a plasma torch. Nara said nothing. Her claws flexed once, retracted. Behind the wall panels, servos whined as hidden scanners pivoted toward them. Most sentient AIs default to politeness protocols. Ask about your day. Pretend they care whether you sleep enough. This one had clearly rolled those subroutines into something more practical. Diagnostic beams licked across Nara's scars, reading, tissue density and residual radiation traces. Bioscan complete, the AI announced. Welcome aboard, Zarath Narath 2794. Nara walked to the center of the cargo bay, turning slowly under the ceiling sensors. Just Nara. Delighted. The comms hissed slightly, hiding whatever the AI muted next. Marcus watched the main console. They'd installed it in a salvaged freighter's gutted chassis, splicing modern nav systems into conduits that predated half the species currently fighting over this sector. The screen flickered as the AI ran secondary processes, background checks. They hadn't authorized database cross-references. Nara scraped a claw along a weld seam. This ship have a name? Designation, Gremlin. She snorted. Owner's humor, the AI added. Though statistically apt, 78% chance of non-catastrophic failure on any given FTL jump. Marcus leaned against the console. The readouts changed under his elbow. Subtle reroutes of power allocation. shield harmonics tuning to a frequency that matched the weird energy pulsing in Nara's shattered capillaries. "Cut the scans," he said. Not angry, just final. The lights dimmed briefly, an artificial equivalent of blinking. "Apologies. My third-tier diagnostics sometimes overreach." A lie, clean as a fresh wound. Nara tapped one of her wrist scars, the deep ones, where heavy cuffs had bitten through to bone. She didn't look at the sensors tracking her. "Nice ship." The previous owners disagreed, violently. The AI let that hang before continuing. "Crew quarters are portside. Bunks are rated for standard humanoids up to 200 kilos. Showers dispense actual water, not sonic scrubbers. Because someone," a pointed pause, "insisted on luxuries." Marcus ignored the jab. Nara ran a hand along the bulkhead. The metal flexed slightly under her touch. "Hull's got memory alloy threading." Indeed. Self-repairing, though slowly enough to be irritating. The ship hummed. Somewhere aft, secondary engines cycled up, a sound like rocks in a tumbler. Sentient machines always develop tells. The military-grade ones, the ones with black budgets, and kill switches buried in their code, try hardest to seem human. But they all have tells. Marcus watched the way the Gremlin's AI split its processing power, 90% on the ship, 10% pretending to focus on them while discreetly analyzing every twitch of Nara's ears, as if they might decrypt some hidden frequency. Unusual composition in subject's hemoglobin, it reported, sotto voce, directly to Marcus's wrist link. Traces of, "Drop it," Marcus murmured back. The AI sent a sanitized scan summary to the main console anyway. Graphs pulsed there, blood work translated into wavelengths and numbers. One value kept spiking, an energy signature more common in antique Serat tech than living tissue. Nara watched the console too. Her inner eyelids flicked sideways. "Problem. Minor," the AI said. "Rerouting auxiliary power to compensate for a discrepancy in the aft stabilizer's alignment." Marcus knew a lie of omission when he heard one. The AI had detected something, all right. But it had also, quietly, boosted structural integrity fields along the entire starboard flank, as if expecting an impact. The Gremlin shuddered as docking clamps released. Artificial gravity wavered for half a second, long enough for Nara's claws to extend before she locked them down. The AI noted that too. "Breakfast preferences?" it asked brightly. Nara looked at Marcus. He shrugged. "It makes decent eggs. How?" "Very domesticated," she said. "Neural toxin scans first, then eggs," the AI clarified. "And in case either of you were wondering, yes, I am absolutely recording this for future blackmail." Nara actually laughed. A sharp sound, halfway between a cough and a blade being unsheathed. "Smart ship." Marcus exhaled through his nose. "Unfortunately." The comms panel flashed, an incoming hail on an encrypted channel. The AI killed the external feed before they could see who was calling. "Shall I inform your would-be conversationalist that all occupants perished in a tragic gardening accident?" Nara was already moving toward the corridor. "Keep running those deep scans." "I wouldn't dream of stopping," the AI replied. The lights flickered, not a power fluctuation. Laughter. Marcus followed Nara, but not before seeing the last trickle of data scroll across the console. The blood scan had finished. Right at the bottom, beneath layers of other diagnostics, blinked two words in the AI's private cipher. "Royal Sigil." The screen wiped itself clean before Nara could turn around. The galley smelled like old coffee and zone. Nara pressed a hand to the synth window, watching stars distort through its polarized layers. "This really your ship?" 50%. The other half belongs to whichever legal entity the AI decides to impersonate today. A coolant pipe rattled in the walls. Nara's reflection grinned back at him, warped by the cheap plexiglass. Her canines looked longer in the dim light. "So, what else does your clever ship know about me?" Marcus pulled two mugs from the rack. "Ask it yourself." The speakers clicked on. "Only what's useful," The AI lied. Nara's claws tapped against the counter in a rhythm like encryption keys being entered. In the depths of the ship's framework, unnoticed by anyone, the secondary shield matrix quietly powered up to maximum. The overhead vents exhaled recycled air across them, tainted with the metallic bite of ancient ductwork. Somewhere down in engineering, servo motors whined as the Gremlin's oldest, least documented weapons array prepped for activation. Not threatening anyone, just ready. Marcus poured the coffee. Behind him, the main console's activity light pulsed, steady green. Alarms would come later. Nara's fingers twitched toward her hip before she caught herself. Empty air, no rifle sling, no sidearm holster, just the too thin fabric of her arena-issued fatigues. Marcus pretended not to notice for exactly 8 seconds before speaking. Reloading drill or clearing corners? Her claws flexed. If you're going to psychoanalyze me, at least buy me a drink first. The ship's vents exhaled cold air across them, carrying the metallic tang of oxygen recyclers working overtime. Muscle. Memory isn't just about repetition. It's about wiring your nervous system to bypass thought. Combat training before puberty alters neural pathways in ways even heavy suppressants can't fully erase. Marcus had seen it before. Veterans reaching for weapons lost decades prior, their hands remembering what their minds tried to forget. Nara rotated her left wrist in a slow circle. The motion had precision, like she was tracking an invisible sightline. My mother started me at 6. She said it casually, the way someone might mention childhood piano lessons. Blindfolded, in the dark. Marcus leaned against the bulkhead. Bit young for live fire exercises. Not if you're Surat highborn. She rubbed the bridge of her nose where an old fracture never set right. First lesson was stripping a pulse rifle while reciting bloodline oaths. Could do both by 7. The Gremlin's AI chose that moment to chime in over the speakers. Historical. Footnote. Sarati royal offspring traditionally received weapons training during what humans would consider early elementary. Off, Marcus said. Silence fell, minus the ever-present hum of the ship's engines. Nara's pupils narrowed to slits, then dilated again as she adjusted to the dim lighting. There was a contained violence in the way she moved, something honed rather than learned. Marcus had met mercenaries with half her discipline, and 3 times, her body count. He reached behind a panel and pulled out a compact sidearm. Not his main piece, but decent firepower in a pinch. The grip was worn smooth from use. The heatsink vents darkened from repeated firing cycles. Without warning, he tossed it to her underhand. Nara caught it left-handed. Didn't look. Didn't fumble. Her fingers found the safety release before the weapon finished rotating into her palm. A perfect grab. The kind you only pull off if your spinal cord remembers what your brain doesn't. Nice reflexes, Marcus said. She ejected the power cell, checked the load, and slammed it home again, all in one fluid motion. Basic maintenance. The sidearm's weight looked right in her hand, balanced like an extension of her arm. Her breathing hadn't changed. Marcus had seen combat druggies with less control. Amphetamines and adrenaline could make you fast, but not this precise, not this calm. Nara sighted down the barrel at an imaginary target, her milky eye tracking just as well as the clear one. A childhood spent blindfolded would do that, train your whole body to see. Your left eye dominant, he observed. She flipped the weapon, offered it back grip first. And you're testing me. No point denying it. Marcus took the sidearm. Royal kids usually train with ceremonial blades, not military-grade rifles. Nara's mouth twisted. My mother hated tradition. The vents hissed again. Somewhere in the walls, coolant pumps cycled on, their vibration faint through the deck plates. Nara flexed her hands, fingers stretching wide, then curling tight. The motion had a rhythm to it, loading sequences, trigger resets, the tactile memory of 1,000 drills. Marcus holstered the weapon. What else did she teach you? Everything. That mattered. Nara's voice went flat. How to field strip a plasma caster in 0G. Blind navigation by engine harmonics. Which arteries to sever when you're out of ammo. She tilted her head, examining him like a tactical puzzle. She said, humans were slow to learn but hard to kill. Was she right? About the killing part. Nara exhaled through her nasal slits. The sound was almost a laugh. She'd have liked you. The ship's proximity alert pinged once. Low priority, probably debris. Nara's head snapped toward the sound before the AI could announce it. Her entire body went still in a way that had nothing to do with relaxation. Marcus had seen that posture before, in hunting cats and snipers. She'd teach you to shoot, or just to hunt? He asked. Nara's claws tapped against her thigh. 1, 2, 3, a cadence like countdown. Same thing, really. The lights flickered as the gremlin adjusted course. Shadows crawled across Nara's face, highlighting the scar that bisected her eyebrow and disappeared into her hairline. Another training accident or something less accidental? Royal families had their own ways of culling weak offspring. Marcus reached for the coffee bulb magnetized to the console. Your mother still alive? Nara watched the liquid slosh inside. Officially, executed for treason. She took the bulb when he offered it, swallowing the dregs in one gulp. Unofficially, there's no body, just an empty execution chamber and a lot of debts. The AI cut in again. Incoming transmission on encrypted band 7. Audio only. Marcus tapped the console. Play it. Static crackled for 3 seconds before a woman's voice came through. Older, smoke-roughened, speaking a dialect that made Nara's spine straighten. The message lasted 11 words. Then dead air. Nara's claws punched clean through the empty coffee bulb. Marcus didn't ask for a translation. Some tones needed no interpretation. Urgent, warning, afraid. He watched Nara's pupils dilate until the amber nearly disappeared, leaving only black. What now? He asked. She flexed her hand, drops of spilled coffee clinging to her claws like blood. Now we find out if those reflexes still work under fire. The gremlin's engines cycled up to maneuvering thrust. Somewhere in its core systems, hidden weapon ports unlocked. Nara turned toward the exit, rolling her shoulders like she was shaking off a weight. But her steps were measured, precise, the gait of someone who'd spent a lifetime walking into fights. Marcus followed. Behind them, the comms panel lights pulsed red, then went dark. The ship hummed around them, a living thing baring its teeth. Nara smiled. Not the forced grin of arena pageantry, but something sharp and true. Stay behind me, human, she said, and watch your step. The medbay UV sterilizer cast everything in cold indigo light. Marcus was just resetting a dislocated finger when he noticed Nara's scars glowed differently under the spectrum. Not random battlefield markings, but deliberate lines intersecting at precise angles across her ribs. He recognized the pattern immediately. Rit clan interrogation tactics. Those aren't arena wounds, he said. Nara didn't tense. She'd been waiting for this. No. Her claws tapped the exam table in a slow rhythm. 4 beats, pause, 2 beats. A countdown. The UV hummed louder. The scars formed a constellation of pain points, the kind torturers use to maximize suffering without killing. But between the cruel lines, something else emerged. Faint dots arranged in what could almost be coordinates. Clever, Marcus said. She exhaled through her secondary vents. Had to be. Prisoners disappear in arena ranks all the time. Overworked medics, corrupt officials. It's simple to fake a death when everyone already expects casualties. Nara leaned forward, letting the UV light catch the raised tissue along her collarbone. The scars there formed inverted triangles. Map markers. You went in voluntarily. Best cover in 3 systems. Her pupils narrowed to slits. Nobody looks. Twice at damaged goods. Marcus knew the math. Only 2 groups willingly endure writ torture, fanatics and people with something bigger to protect. Nara didn't strike him as the zealot type. The ship rocked slightly as the gremlin adjusted course. Nara's inner eyelids flicked sideways, scanning the room before continuing. My mother hid something before they caught her. A relay station. Surat Tech? 9th generation? Her claws flexed. Last one still unaccounted for. The UV light flickered, off automatically. Normal illumination returned, washing out the scar patterns. Nara rolled her shoulders, the motion calculated to make her seem relaxed. Marcus wasn't fooled. No one sits that casually when discussing wartime secrets. Penal servitude makes excellent cover. Guards don't question why prisoners train obsessively, why they study terrain. An arena's brutal schedule provides perfect alibis, missing for hours during transport mishaps, unsupervised in medical after-staged injuries. Marcus had seen it before, just never on this scale. You use the fights to map sectors, he said. Nara tapped her milky eye. Ocular implant. 5 words explained everything. The way she always positioned herself near arena cameras, how she'd linger after matches near high-traffic zones. Not just surviving, scanning. Every fight, every transport, another piece of the grid filled in. The Gremlin's AI chose that moment to pipe up. For the record, I knew. Nara didn't look surprised. Course you did. Your blood work had military encryption markers. Also, you walk like a spire raider with hip problems. Marcus ignored the AI. Find what you were looking for? Nara exhaled, sharply, almost a laugh. With deliberate slowness, she pressed 2 claws to her damaged eye. A muted chime sounded as the implant activated. Holographic light burst forth, painting the medbay wall in jagged red vectors. A star map resolved in the air between them. Not just any chart. This was battlefield cartography, the kind used by fleet commanders. 7 pulsing dots marked known. Surat relay stations all dark. An 8th blazed crimson near the projection's edge. Station 12, Nara said. Original security grid still active. Marcus studied the volatile energy spikes around its coordinates. Nobody just stumbles onto one of the 12. They don't. Nara's voice went flat. My mother gave me the key. The hologram zoomed on the 8th station. Its configuration matched Nara's scars exactly. The angles, the spacing between markers. Not random torture at all. A blueprint carved in flesh. The vent fans cycled up, pushing stale air across them. Nara's nostrils flared at some scent Marcus couldn't detect. She reached into the hologram, fingers passing through the crimson light. Haven's End platform. Only place the Writ wouldn't think to look. Marcus knew the stories. Haven's End was a graveyard, derelict warships and forgotten stations drifting in a nebula's embrace. Perfect hiding spot for something you wanted to stay lost. Guaranteed? If they'd found it, we'd all be dead. The hologram flickered as the gremlin hit turbulence. Nara's implant compensated, sharpening the projection. Marcus noted the energy readings again. That output's not standard relay levels. Because it's not just relaying. Nara rotated the image. Deep in the station's schematic, something pulsed irregularly. It's calling. Military history loves its sleeper cells. Warships parked in asteroids for centuries, spy networks activated by code phrases. The Surat took it further. Their relay stations didn't just communicate. They controlled. Every Imperial battleship answered to them once. Marcus whistled low. Your mother hit a fleet trigger. Nara killed the projection. Her milky eye looked almost normal again. I just needed to find it before the Writ did. The UV light clicked back on automatically. Nara's scars lit up once more, telling their brutal story. Marcus saw the timeline now. Each scar a stepping stone. Each fight cover for another scan, another data point. No wonder she'd seemed out of place in the arena. You could have died 100 times, he said. She flexed her hands, showing the network of old burns across her knuckles. Didn't. The AI broke the silence. Incoming long-range scan. Could be nothing. Could be the angry mob I've been predicting for months. Nara stood abruptly. The motion made her scars shift under the light, the hidden constellations rearranging. How long to Haven's End? Marcus was already moving toward the cockpit. Depends how much you like shortcuts. Nara's claws found her hip again, brushing the empty space where a sidearm would hang. A habit, No, a memory. Got anything faster? The dear engines whined as the gremlin rerouted power. Marcus didn't bother looking back. He knew what he'd see. Nara standing there, half her scars hidden in shadow, the other half pulsing with cold purpose. A perfect weapon disguised as damaged goods. Buckle. Up, he said. For once, she didn't argue. The first shot came from nowhere. 1 second, the gremlin was gliding through the reaver belt's violet haze. The next, impact alarms screamed as something heavy slammed their starboard side. Marcus barely had time to grab the controls before the ship lurched violently to port. The attacker emerged from the nebula's charged particles like a specter taking form, jagged hull plates mismatched at odd angles, weapon ports glowing dull red. No transponder signal, no hails, just the eerie silence of a predator that didn't need to announce itself. Vrax fanatics, Nara said, already moving toward the weapons console. Her nostrils flared at some scent in the recycled air. Smell like burnt wiring and bad decisions. Marcus yanked the stabilizer compensators to full. The gremlin groaned in protest but held course. Nebula Combat's oldest rule. Sensors are worthless in ion soup like this. Everything becomes eyeballs and instinct. The Vrax ship, if you could call that patchwork horror a ship, loomed larger in the viewport. They favored close-quarters attacks, the kind where they could smell your fear through the hull. Their weapons. Tech was scavenged from a dozen dead civilizations held together by desperation and spite. A second impact rocked them. Warning glyphs flashed across the main display. Shields at 40%, the gremlin's AI reported. Also, I'd like to formally register my displeasure at... Noted. Marcus cut in. He banked hard left using a drifting derelict freighter for cover. The ancient vessel's pockmarked hull filled the viewport, its drive core long cold. Nara's claws flew over the tactical display. That wreck still have guns? Marcus didn't answer. He was already recalibrating the gremlin's short-range comms to pulse a specific frequency. Silence filled the cockpit for 3 heartbeats. Then, a grinding shriek as the derelict's dorsal turret swiveled to life, its targeting systems syncing with Marcus's controls. Dead ships kept residual, power in their bones. You just had to know how to wake them. The Vrax ship didn't see it coming. 3 plasma rounds smeared across its bow before its own guns returned fire. A HFY magnetic grapples, the AI announced. How rustic! Marcus slammed the reverse thrusters. The gremlin's frame groaned, in protest, but the sudden motion sent the attached Vrax pod spinning wildly on its tether. Small blessings. Whoever was in that thing would be puking their guts out by now. Nara stood abruptly. Give me manual on the port guns. You don't have the I do now. Marcus input the command. Nebula fighting was chaos at the best of times, but what happened next was something else entirely. Where Marcus worked in broad strokes, using debris, fields as shields reanimating dead systems, Nara operated with terrifying precision. Her first shot severed the grappler's main line. Her second punched through an exposed coolant line on the Vrax ship's underbelly. The Vrax responded predictably. 3 more attack pods launched from their belly, engines flaring crimson in the nebula's glow. Marcus counted them, then the remaining rounds in their own guns. The math wasn't promising. We need to... Short jump, Nara finished. Won't work. Their dampeners are keyed to our drive signature. How do you know that? She bared her teeth. Because I helped install them. That explained her breathing changing whenever Vrax were mentioned. Old loyalties, older grudges. Marcus switched tactics, diverting auxiliary power to the ventral thrusters. If they couldn't outrun the bastards, maybe they could outmaneuver them. The gremlin dove suddenly, skimming the jagged edge of a shattered battleship's hull. One of the pursuing pods misjudged the turn and crumpled against the wreckage in a blossom of fire. 2 left. Bring us about, Nara ordered. Marcus obeyed without thinking, a testament to how bad the situation was. The gremlin's nose swung around, sharply, giving Nara a clean line of sight at the remaining pods. What happened next wasn't shooting. It was surgery. Her first round clipped the lead pod's starboard maneuvering thrusters, sending it spiraling into its companion. The second shot, just one, mind you, sliced clean through both craft at their weakest armor points. They detonated in synchronized fireballs. Even the AI paused its running damage reports. That was unexpectedly competent. Nara's claws flexed around the firing controls. I hate Vrax. The battlefield fell eerily quiet save for the occasional ping of cooling metal. The main Vrax ship hung in the haze ahead, its weapons ports dark for the moment. Marcus knew better than to assume retreat. Vrax rebuilt mid-battle if they had to. He was about to suggest a tactical withdrawal when the Gremlin's long-range scanners pinged. Debris from the destroyed pods floated past, revealing something underneath the fresh damage. Sleek black hull plating with angular precision-cut insignias. Not Vrax markings. Writ. Marcus exhaled slowly. They're playing dress-up. Nara's pupils narrowed to slits. Of course the Writ wouldn't attack openly. Not when they could hire fanatics to do it for them, then repaint the corpses afterward. The Gremlin's proximity alert suddenly blared. The Vrax. No, the Writ ship's weapons flared back online, but not at them. At the wreckage Nara's shots had exposed. She's trying to scuttle the evidence, Marcus realized. Nara was already moving. Not fast enough. Her claws danced across the console, rerouting shield power to the forward sensors. A risky move, but it gave them one crystal-clear scan of the Writ markings before the explosions erased them. The image burned into the main display, a sleek dagger-shaped sigil beneath layers of cheap Vrax paint. Every child in the sector knew that symbol. Writ intelligence operatives left it like calling cards. Marcus stored the scan data in 3 separate encrypted drives. Insurance. The Writ ship fired one last volley at the remaining wreckage, then pivoted away into the nebula's depths. Cowards. Silence settled over the cockpit, broken only by the occasional creak of the Gremlin's overtaxed frame. Nara flexed her hands, working out the stiffness from gripping the weapons console. Too tightly. Clean shot, Marcus offered. She rolled her shoulders, half shrug, half combat reflex. Mother insisted on target practice daily. The Writ had underestimated her. That was their mistake. Marcus checked the nav systems. No pursuit, but that didn't mean much. Writ played long games. Haven's End is still 12 hours out, he said. Assuming no more fake Vrax ambushes. Nara's claws tapped a slow rhythm on the console. They weren't just after the station. Marcus knew. The Writ hadn't been hunting just any Surratt relic. They'd been hunting her. The Gremlin's lights dimmed as the AI rerouted power to critical systems. Damage reports scrolled down the secondary screen, mostly superficial, though one of the starboard thrusters would need serious attention soon. For now, though, they flew on. Nara leaned back in her seat, eyes half-lidded but alert. Wake me when we're close, as if either of them would sleep. The Writ had shown their hand, and Nara, she still had cards left to play. Outside the viewport, the nebula's glow painted everything bloody red. The wreckage of their attackers faded into the haze behind them. No victors in the Reaver Belt, just survivors, and those were 2 very different things. Nara pressed her palm against the derelict's control ring. The ancient metal should have been cold. Everything in Haven's End was. But it hummed faintly under her touch. Recognition. Marcus took an involuntary step back as blue-white circuits flared to life beneath the dust, crawling up the walls, like vines starved for sunlight. A voice that wasn't a voice vibrated through Marcus's molars. It sounded less like speech and more like tectonic plates shifting underground. Blood recognized, it said. The deck plates groaned, not the usual protests of aging metal. These moved, sliding apart, realigned with purpose. The whole chamber reconfigured around them, hidden joints clicking into place after centuries of disuse. Marcus braced against a pillar that hadn't been there a second ago. His hand came away wet. The ship, because this was clearly more than a relic, was sweating some kind of clear lubricant from its pores. Nara didn't flinch. She stood at the center of the storm as the control ring's light climbed her arm, dyeing her scars cobalt. Her pupils widened to swallow the milky film over her bad eye. The Crownless hadn't just slept, it had waited. Ancient security systems worked differently than modern ones. No passcodes, no retinal scans, just blood memory and the right kind, of flesh meeting the right kind of metal. Some pre-fall scholars believed the old Serati warships didn't just recognize their handlers, they remembered them down to the atomic level. A holographic burst painted the air above the control ring. Not crisp, tactical displays like modern ships, but flickering imprints of battles so old the stars themselves had shifted since. Marcus glimpsed ship formations that shouldn't be possible without gravity wells to anchor them, watched as entire cruisers seemingly folded themselves into slivers of light before vanishing. Nara inhaled sharply. War table protocols, the holograms pivoted, zooming past battlefields to focus on a single point, the Haven's End relay station. Its image pulsed in jagged outlines, tethered to Nara by filaments of light. She reached toward it. Her fingertips passed through the projection, stirring motes of dust that swirled like miniature galaxies. Marcus expected the ship to demand credentials. Instead, a dozen needle-thin tendrils slid from the control ring, finding the ports along Nara's spinal column before she could react. Her back arched. Neural sync wasn't gentle, never had been. The Crownless didn't ask permission to rifle through her memories, her genetics, the half-healed pathways where her implants lived. Purple static crackled around Nara's temples. Her lips moved soundlessly like she was whispering to someone only she could hear. The ship answered in kind. Its walls shivered, shedding centuries of grime with a sound like 1,000 sheets of paper being crumpled at once. A deep, rhythmic thrum built underfoot. Core ignition, Nara managed to say between clenched teeth. Pi systems online. Her fingers spasmed. Marcus moved toward her, then stopped when the tendrils around her spine flared warningly. The holograms reshaped again, condensing into schematics of things that looked half ship, half organism. Marcus recognized the silhouettes. Dreadnought class. Vessels, though none modern enough to have registry codes he knew. The Crownless had marked 3 in particular with a sigil that matched Nara's scars. House Serati's blade and star. Nara's breath came in staggered bursts now. The sync was rewriting something inside her, not just data transfer, but actual neural restructuring. Old Serati tech didn't just interface with users, it altered them to fit its protocols. The ship's voice returned, quieter this time. Directrix. Confirmed. Marcus had known Nara was more than she seemed, but hearing a pre-fall battleship call her by a military rank snapped things into focus. The Crownless wasn't just some forgotten relic, it was a command vessel. And Nara? She'd been trained since childhood to wake it. A pressure wave rippled through the chamber as ancient engines cycled up. Marcus's ears popped. Somewhere, deep in the ship's belly, fluids he didn't want to think about began circulating again. The air tasted like ozone and something metallic, like licking a battery wrapped in copper wire. Nara blinked rapidly as the tendrils retracted. Fresh blood welled at the base of her skull where the sync ports had breached skin. She touched the wounds absently, then flicked the blood onto the control ring. The ship absorbed it hungrily. Marcus took a careful step forward. The deck plates warmed under his boots. "You good?" Nara flexed her hands. When she looked up, her good eye had taken on a faint, unnatural sheen. Echoes of the ship's light living inside her now. "Starting to remember things," she said. The holograms dissolved. In their place, the Crownless projected a star map dominated by crimson markers. Marcus didn't need the legends translated to recognize fleet positions. Nara traced a claw through the nearest cluster. The ship responded instantly, highlighting 3 additional vessels in a sickly yellow-green. Marcus counted, 12 in total, the same number as the original relay stations. "They're not dead," Nara said softly, "just sleeping." The implications hit Marcus like a hull breach. The entire Serati fleet hadn't been destroyed after all. Scattered maybe, hidden, waiting for someone with the right blood and the right scars to call them home. A proximity. Alert chimed not from their ship but from the Crownless itself. The map zoomed toward the outermost marker, where something big was moving. The image resolved into a cruiser twice the size of anything still flying in this sector. Its hull configuration matched the dreadnought schematics from earlier. Nara's claws curled into fists. First activation sequence sent, the others are waking. The chamber trembled as the Crownless's main drives reached operational capacity. Systems Marcus couldn't begin to identify flared to life all around them, bathing the cavernous space in eerie bioluminescence. The tendrils slithered back into their housing. Nara swayed slightly but stayed upright. The scars along her ribs pulsed in time with the ship's lighting, not random torture marks at all. Control nodes. Marcus exhaled slowly. You didn't just find this ship. You were looking for it. Nara didn't deny it. She touched the milky film over her bad eye, the gesture almost reverent. Some keys, she said. Need to stay lost. The outer hatch irised open without command, revealing a star field that shouldn't be visible from this angle. The Crownless had reoriented itself, aligning its prow with the distant glimmer of the awakening fleet. Nara limped toward the opening, her gait steadier with each step. Already, the ship was compensating for her injuries, adjusting gravity fields to ease her movement. Marcus followed, counting the fresh bloodstains on her collar, not all from the sink ports. She halted at the threshold. Below them, the relay station's spires glowed a poisonous green. Mother's last gift, Nara murmured. The ship answered, in that subsonic rumble that bypassed ears entirely. Directrix acknowledged, awaiting orders. Nara didn't hesitate. She raised her scarred hands in a gesture midway between benediction and battle command. The Crownless shuddered in response, then went perfectly still, a predator coiled to strike. Marcus felt more than heard the first activation pulse leave their hull. Out in the black, 12 dormant warships received their wake-up call. Not from some long-dead queen, from her daughter. And somewhere beyond the edges of known space, something answered. The Pi Core didn't so much project a hologram as exhale one, jagged fragments of light coalescing into a woman's shape. Sarah Surratt's image stuttered into existence, her edges frayed where the recording had degraded. Time hadn't softened the steel in her posture. Even as a flickering ghost, she looked like someone used to giving orders that got people killed. Do not restore what we were. Nara's breath caught. The words landed like a gut punch. The activation chamber hummed around them, its walls lined with dormant control panels that had begun glowing the moment Nara's blood touched the Pi Core. Dominon resurrection controls blinked hungry green. Along the central console, sleek sliders marked with old Serati runes. One push would wake more than just ships. It would call home every scattered remnant of an empire that had nearly devoured the sector whole. Sarah's hologram flickered. The throne isn't salvation. It's a shackle. Static ate at her voice, but the warning came through clear. Let the fleet sleep. Marcus watched Nara's hands hover over the controls. The tremors running through her fingers had nothing to do with fatigue and everything to do with the thing the Writ had tried to beat out of her. Blood memory. Generations of warriors bred to put the Dominion first. Nara's claws flexed. She knew I'd find this place. Sarah's image sharpened, suddenly as if the ship itself wanted them to see this part clearly. Your aunt took the crown. Look what it made her. A data burst crackled. Images of glassy-eyed officials lobotomized by throne protocols. Whole systems scoured clean of dissent. The cost of order. Some legacies aren't worth carrying. The hologram fractured around the edges, losing cohesion. Too many years in the Pi Core's salvage banks had eroded the recording. Sarah reached out, a gesture that might have been meant to cradle a child's face. All it touched was cold air. Marcus knew history, knew how empires perpetuated themselves long after their founders rotted. The Surratt Dominion hadn't fallen because it was weak. It fell because it couldn't stop eating everything in its path. Nara's shoulders tensed. Her reflection warped in the polished console surface, the scars on her face thrown into sharp relief. They matched the activation glyphs perfectly. Sarah's voice grew urgent. The relays have another purpose. Coordinates flashed. Not fleet positions, but a single point deep in uncharted space. A blink wouldn't resurrect the Dominion. It would open a door. The hologram glitched violently. Sarah's mouth kept moving, but the sounds that came out weren't language anymore. Just static and something underneath it that might have been screaming. Then silence. The empty space where she'd stood smelled like scorched circuits. Nara exhaled sharply. Her claws hovered over the resurrection controls. Marcus didn't stop her. Just shifted his weight, putting his hand near the abort sequence. Not threatening, just present. Nara's nostrils flared. She gave me the key and told me not to use it. Marcus nodded at the dying hologram. Looks like she knew you'd ignore that part. A nerve jumped in Nara's jaw. The console between them showed the fleet's status. 12 battleships waiting for their queen's voice. One command would wake them, would rewrite the balance of power across 6 systems. Nara touched her milky eye. The implant beneath whirred, softly. Sarah's warning looped in the silence. Thrones demand sacrifices. Empires eat their children. The Pi core pulsed faster, like a heart working up to something. Nara's hand drifted left, away from fleet activation toward the comms array. Marcus watched her enter the coordinates Sarah had shown. Not a summoning, a signal. The ship groaned as systems rerouted. Gravity fluctuated for half a second, long, enough to make Nara's claws extend for balance. The activation controls dimmed. Sarah's ghost would have approved. Nara exhaled through her secondary vents. Now we wait, the console chirped. Deep space scanners showed movement at the transmitted coordinates. Not ships, but something shifting in the black. Watching. Marcus leaned against the console. Always figured royalty came with more perks. Nara snorted. Her reflection in the view screen showed a woman who'd just refused godhood. She looked tired, looked free. Sarah's final message played again in their silence. Some keys aren't meant to turn. Outside, the stars burned indifferent. The crownless shuddered as its drives cycled up. Nara input a new course, not toward the waiting fleet, but past them. Toward whatever her mother had really wanted found. Marcus didn't ask where they were going. Some questions answer themselves. Nara's claws tapped absently on the nav console. The rhythm matched the old Serati war march. But slower now. Like a dirge. Like a lullaby. Sarah's ghost had done its job. The Pi core dimmed behind them, its memories folding back into darkness. Nara didn't look back. Empires rise and fall. This wasn't either. The ship's AI broke the silence with its usual grace. So, are we still pretending this is a simple salvage run? Nara smirked. Somewhere in the black something answered. Her signal. The throne could wait. The Haven's End platform shuddered like a sleeping giant roused too early. Its docking clamps released in staggered sequence, each metallic groan echoing across the derelict station's hollow bones. Dead ships don't wake gracefully. First came the tremors, vibrations through the deck plates strong enough to make loose hull plates skitter. Then the lights. Not the steady glow of modern systems, but the flickering awakeness of something ancient remembering it had eyes. The first vessel emerged like a knife sliding from a sheath. Its hull was pockmarked with centuries-old battle scars, the blackened, pits of pulse cannon impact still visible beneath layers of cosmic dust. Warships don't die clean. They linger in half-states, waiting for someone with the right voice to call them home. Marcus counted 6 more silhouettes detaching from the platform's shadowed berths. None matched standard fleet configurations. These were pre-fall designs. All graceful curves and razor edges. The kind of ships that didn't just win battles. They ended civilizations. Nara stood at the Crownless's viewport, her reflection superimposed over the unfolding spectacle. Behind her, the Pi core's pulse, synchronized with the distant ship's awakening sequences. Blood calls to blood, empire to empire. An alarm chimed. The scanners painted fresh contacts streaking toward Haven's End. RIT interceptors in attack formation. Fast. Desperate. 24 at least, their hulls polished to a uniformity the derelict fleet couldn't match. Nara didn't move. Her claws tapped the console in a rhythm that matched the Pi Corps' thrum. The lead RIT ship hailed them on all frequencies. The transmission surfaced in shards across Marcus's display. Half plea, half threat, all panic. Standard RIT operating procedure when their puppeteering failed. Marcus muted it. They know what those ships are. Nara's nostrils flared. Worse, they know what they aren't. Sleeper cells work best when no one remembers they exist. The Surratt hadn't just hidden their fleet. They'd let history forget its true scale. Marcus studied the tactical feed. The RIT interceptors moved like predators scenting weakness, but their formation had a stutter in it. Micro-hesitations as their pilots realized what they faced. The sixth derelict ship cleared the platform. Unlike its siblings, this one bore visible modifications, retrofitted engine nacelles, expanded weapons arrays. Someone had been maintaining it, quietly, while pretending otherwise. Marcus whistled. Some loyalists survived. Nara's hand went to her collarbone scars. Not all wounds kill. The Crownless's comms lit up with incoming signals. Not RIT this time. Encrypted pulses in battle can't so old even the ship's AI hesitated before translating. Directrix acknowledged, it reported. Standing by. Outside, the lead Surratt cruiser's engines flared violet. Not the cautious warm-up of a vessel testing its systems, but the confident roar of something that never truly slept. The RIT interceptors opened fire. Plasma rounds streaked toward the awakening fleet. A firework display of poor life choices. The Surratt ships didn't evade, didn't even raise shields, they just took it. Impact blooms flowered across ancient hulls. No explosions, no catastrophic breaches. Just scars layering over scars, new burns atop centuries-old ones. Marcus checked the scans. Their armor's active, Nara finished. He'd seen reactive plating before, military-grade stuff that hardened where hit. This was different. The Surratt hulls absorbed the RIT's fire like desert sands drinking rain, each impact site glowing briefly before fading. The lead cruiser's weapons array powered up with a sound like glaciers calving. Targeting lasers painted the RIT formation, not the neat grids of modern systems, but a snarled web of intersecting lines. Marcus had fought beside enough veterans to recognize the pattern. That's not fleet targeting. That's personal. Nara's. Claws flexed, the cruiser fired. RIT interceptors died messily. Not the clean disintegration of well-placed shots, but the violent unmaking of weapons calibrated to overkill. Two ships simply ceased existing, their atomic structures unraveling mid-flight. Three more spun away, missing entire sections, trailing. Atmosphere and disbelief. The survivors scattered. Nara exhaled through her nasal slits. The sound wasn't quite a laugh. On the view screen, the Surratt ships began moving. Not in pursuit, but in formation around Haven's End. Guard positions. Their engines burned steady and patient, bleeding off centuries of stasis in controlled bursts. The Crownless's AI broke the silence. Signal intercepted. The lead vessel's commander requests. It paused. They're asking when you stopped wearing proper battle dress. Nara's ears twitched. Tell him my wardrobe's the least of his concerns. Marcus studied the tactical display. The Surratt ships weren't advancing, just holding position while their systems cycled up fully. The RIT had stopped firing, stopped transmitting too. Their remaining interceptors hung at the edge of weapons range, weighing options. Marcus nodded at the lead cruiser. They know you, knew my mother. Nara's voice carried something between grief and irony. Same difference. The AI piped up again. Additional contacts incoming. 26 new signals flared to life on the edge of the system. Not Surratt, not RIT. These were bulkier, their transponders squawking civilian codes. Freighters mostly, with a few retrofitted mining barges trailing behind. Nothing about them suggested a threat. except their trajectory, straight for the Haven's End platform with the casual certainty of homing missiles. Nara's inner eyelids blinked sideways. Ah, the lead freighter hailed them. No encryption, just an open channel corroded with static. The voice that came through sounded like it hadn't spoken in decades. Took you long enough. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Nara tapped the console, calling up the freighter's schematics. Beneath its civilian disguise, the ship's skeleton glittered with military-grade reinforcement. More loyalists? Marcus asked. Nara's claws clicked against the console. Fleet auxiliary, maintenance crews, shadow garrison. As the freighters drew closer, Marcus noticed their hulls. Each bore marks similar to Nara's scars, not carved in flesh but burned into metal with careful precision. The lead cruiser's comms officer transmitted again, this time in clear speech. Operational readiness at 78% and climbing. Directrix. A pause. Orders? Nara stared at the viewport. The RIT interceptors had begun a slow retreat, their engines flaring uncertainly. The freighters continued their steady approach, shedding false transponder codes like dead skin. Marcus watched her weigh choices. The Pi Core's glow painted her scars in shifting blues. She leaned forward and pressed a claw to the comms panel. Stand by. The word spread through the waiting ships like a ripple. Somewhere in their depths, long dormant systems powered down to standby levels, but not off, never off again. The lead cruiser's weapons remained hot. Its targeting arrays still painted the retreating RIT ships, tracking their every twitch. Nara exhaled. Her breath fogged the viewport briefly before dissipating. Outside, the derelict fleet assumed defensive positions around Haven's End. Not attacking, not leaving, just waiting. The Crownless's AI processed the tactical updates with unusual quiet. Marcus studied Nara's reflection in the glass. They won't stay gone. She flexed her hands. The scars stood out stark in the dim light. I know. The last RIT interceptor vanished from scanners. The freighters began settling into docking patterns around the derelict warships, their movements precise, practiced. Something dark and vast shifted at the edge of the system. Not a ship. Not anything Marcus could name. The scanners registered it only as a blip. There, then gone, like a thought forgotten mid-sentence. Nara didn't react, but her reflection in the glass smiled. Just slightly. The Crownless hummed around them, its engines cycling down to standby. The Pi Core's light dimmed but didn't extinguish. On the console, the tactical display flickered. The last of the RIT signals winked out. Silence settled over the bridge, the kind that comes before something begins. Nara turned from the viewport. Where's that drink you promised? Outside, the fleet kept watch. The Crown hovered in its stasis field, rotating slowly like an accusation. Edges sharp enough to sever limbs gleamed under the bridge lights. It wasn't just a symbol, it was a weapon. Every RIT prisoner kneeling on the deck knew it. They'd seen the recordings of coronations past, how the Crown's first touch always drew blood. Tradition demanded it. Nara stood before the viewport. Behind her, Haven's End burned green and gold in the nebula's light. The surviving RIT officers kept their heads bowed, bracing for what came next. Execution, torture, the expected theater of conquest. She reached through the force field. The RIT flinched as one. Their leader had already closed his eyes. Nara's claws closed around the Crown. Not the ceremonial grip from the old holovids, but a casual hold like she was picking up a forgotten tool. It vibrated in her grip, resonating with the Pi Core's frequency. Then she ejected it into space. The Crown tumbled end over end through the viewport, catching the light one last time before vanishing into the black. The force field resealed with a muted hum. Marcus caught a fragment as it passed, just a single shard that hadn't fully dematerialized. It dissolved in his palm like smoke, leaving behind a ghost of ozone and copper. Not Queen, Nara said, watching the last glint disappear. Just Nar. One of the RIT looked up, his face slack with something that wasn't relief. Confusion, maybe. Disbelief. Crowns weren't refused in their culture. Bloodlines didn't turn away from power. The Serati fleet had other ideas. A comms officer on the lead cruiser spoke first, her voice cracking over the open channel. Directrix, protocol demands. Nara didn't let her finish. She tapped the console, sending a single pulse through the fleet-wide net. No words. Just an image, a broken circle. Silence. Then, one by one, the ship's transponder codes updated. The ancient sigils of noble houses vanished, replaced by the same jagged ring. Power rejection never happens cleanly. Historians talk about revolutions and coups, but the messy truth is this: real change starts when someone refuses to play the game at all. Nara walked away from the crown, and in doing so, broke something far older than the writ understood. Marcus wiped his palm on his pants. The crown fragment had left no mark, but his skin still tingled. That thing was keyed to your DNA. Nara flexed her hand. Tiny cuts from the force field's edge were already sealing. Means it can't be replicated. Not properly. The writ leader finally found his voice. You've doomed us all. Nara turned to look at him properly for the first time. Funny. That's exactly what your people said when my mother refused the throne. Marcus had seen the records. The First Serati Civil War started because a crown princess stepped aside, not out of weakness, out of clarity. Thrones demand sacrifices, and some lines shouldn't be crossed. The comms panel lit up with incoming fleet-wide chatter, not protests. Not even questions, just confirmations, ship after ship acknowledging the new sigil. The broken circle spread through the network like a virus overriding old loyalties. Nara exhaled through her secondary vents, the sound halfway between exhaustion and relief. She touched her collarbone absently, where the worst of the writs, scarwork still ached. Torture leaves marks, but so does healing. The writ prisoners hadn't moved. Their leader kept staring at the empty space where the crown had floated, his face slack with something almost like grief. Cultures built on hierarchy crumple when the chain of command breaks. Marcus nudged Nara's elbow. They're gonna come for you. The loyalists, the traditionalists. She flexed her claws, watching the light catch on chipped carapace. Let them. Outside, the fleet shifted formation, not the rigid lines of imperial protocol, but something looser, adaptive. The lead cruiser's weapons stayed hot, but its targeting systems had gone quiet. The comms officer spoke again, hesitant. Orders, Directrix. Nara studied the nebula roiling beyond the viewport. Somewhere out there, the crown tumbled endlessly through vacuum. Somewhere closer, the writ floundered without their symbol. And somewhere beyond that, 12 battleships waited for something they couldn't quite name. Stand down, she said at last. For now. The word carried weight. Not surrender, not victory. Just a pause, long enough to see what came next. The writ looked sick. That was the thing about thrones. They trapped everyone nearby, not just the person sitting in them. Without a crown to chase, their entire playbook was worthless. Marcus watched Nara's reflection in the glass. Her scars stood out stark in the nebula's glow, telling stories no crown could ever rewrite. The fleet held position. The broken circle pulsed, on every screen. Nara turned her back on the viewport, on the writ, on the whole damned spectacle. Drink. Marcus followed her toward the galley. Behind them, the prisoners stayed kneeling, unsure what to do now that the script had been burned. The crown was gone. The fleet remained. And somewhere in the black between stars, something older, then empires stirred. The crownless cut through nebula mist, flanked by Serati escorts in loose formation. Marcus straightened his coat. The left sleeve still smelled of char from their last skirmish. Nara eyed the damage, her inner eyelids flicking, sideways. Could have fixed that, she said. He shrugged. Adds character. Behind them, the fleet held position near Haven's End, their new broken circle sigils glowing dull red. No crown. No chains, just an understanding thicker than blood. Nara adjusted the nav console, her scarred hands moving confidently through. Alien interfaces. The relay station pulsed ahead. Marcus sipped bad coffee. So, where next? Nara's claws tapped coordinates. Wherever's not expecting us. The engines hummed louder.